What is up? What is up, guys? Welcome to the Sovereign Lifestyle Podcast. I believe, geez, these are echoing like crazy, but I believe that we are on episode 10, which is crazy. That's a absolutely insane benchmark. Um, I've been doing two of these a week. I've basically the whole idea behind this podcast, like I've wanted to do this for years and years and years, as I've talked about in the first episode. I think it was the first. But anyways, my point being, hold on one second. I gotta figure out how to turn this off or it's gonna drive me nuts. Okay. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay. There we go. Sorry. We have a headset that you can like listen to yourself and it gives you feedback. Anyway, it's driving me crazy. So, anyways, guys, the whole point of this podcast in the beginning was to be more of a motivational, right? Like mindset type podcast where essentially I just walk you guys through the mindset that kind of took me from where I was before to getting to where I am now. And I mean, obviously it's definitely been a journey. Like there's definitely been so many things that I've had to overcome and go through and but on the flip side, there's also so many things that I've achieved and so many things that have been really, cool to experience. And like, the reality is like, I just want to be able to give you guys the tools that helped me get here, and I'm not saying like I'm above everyone. Like that simply doesn't come from ego. It's more of just like documenting the process, right? And that's the way that I look at it is like if I can just simply sit down and like show you guys what it took in order for me to be successful and me to like take these risks and make these jumps that I've had to in my life and like come out on the other side with a little bit more freedom, or excuse me, or come out on the other side with like a little bit closer to the life that I ideally wanted to live from the very beginning. Um, that's been the primary focus of this podcast, guys. Um, and over the last 10 episodes, I feel like it was interesting because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they basically were like, they've listened to my podcast, and they're saying like, this is actually like, I don't know, it's cool to see how it impacts people. That's what I'm trying to get at is like, it's really cool when you have those people who actually sit down and listen and pay attention to the things that you are saying. And it's cool to think of like what you can do or what they can go take that from that and apply it to their lives and see like what will change for them. And I think ultimately that's going to be the focus of today is how do you create leaders, right? And this has been a big focus in my business and sovereign lifestyle for a long time now is like I'm getting to the point where I have my solid clientele base and I've consistently been able to bring in clients and we've consistently been able to grow for a long period of time. But now it's like, now I'm to a point where I want to help people, come up and I want to help them in their journey, to transition into fitness coaching and then make money and be able to provide a living for themselves off of that. And then ultimately find freedom through the daily disciplines that it takes in order to be that person, being disciplined enough to work for yourself and be able to maintain your client base and make sure that you're keeping everything going while, working for yourself. Because the reality is the majority of people can't do that, guys. And that's one thing that like that really separates the entrepreneurs from everyone else is like if you give an entrepreneur a task, they will come back with it done. Like if they know that if there's like a reason behind why they need to do this task and it like obviously translates into money or some sort of productivity. um I mean, I wouldn't even say money, but if they know that this task is going to bring them closer to their goal, it will be done. Like there's not an excuse. There is no like no time excuse. They weren't too busy. They weren't, they didn't have to go out on the weekend or whatever the thing is. Like it gets done. And ultimately that's what I'm finding is like it's that discipline that people need, and they don't realize that. Like the majority of people look at entrepreneurship and they're like, oh yeah, well he's in Thailand and he's in New York and flying all over the nation and making money and driving sports cars and stuff like that. But the reality is like that's like 1% of the time. Like that's 1% of the time. The other 99% of the time, you are in an office behind a desk and you have nobody forcing you to be there. Like you have to be there for yourself and for your clients. You have to show up. And so with that being said, I'm kind of going on a tangent, but with that being said, you have to take those attributes and you have to apply them to your own life, right? Like if you ever want to be, what's the saying? It's, if you want to be able to spend without looking at your bank account, then you have to work. I'm going to restart that. If you want to be able to spend without having to look at your bank account, you have to work without looking at the clock, right? And if you can force yourself to that extent where it's like you just show up, right? You show up every day, you put in the hours, you put in the hard work, and you don't expect anything in return. The crazy part is like, yes, you will probably have some hard months. Yes, like it's not going to come overnight, but on the flip side, your income is not capped. So like you're not showing up for $3, $4, $5,000 a month anymore. Like you're showing up in hopes to make 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000, $100,000 in a month, And so a lot of the time, like your year is going to look like zeros for the first 6 months. And on month 7, you hit 100K, and month 8, you hit 50 and you still made 150K, and it's just simply that mindset that people don't understand is like, you have to continuously show up and do the work regardless of the results. And then when the results come, it will all make sense. But until then, it's not going to make sense. So with that being said, to take that back to what we were talking about is creating leaders, right? Leaders are people who show up no matter the results. Leaders are the ones on the front lines who are hitting their numbers, who are doing all the things that they need to do in order to make it to their goal, right? Like if their goal is even, like if there's even a chance of them hitting their goal, they are there. They're not playing video games. They're not at the lake. They're not out drinking. Like they're there working. And and it's interesting because it's like, how do you transfer that passion, right? And this is where passion in business really comes into play, because for me, I'm like, Sovereign Lifestyle is my passion project. That's even though it's interesting because like never had a main thing. Like I never had a job that paid a decent salary or whatever, and then decided to do Sovereign Lifestyle on the side. It was always Sovereign Lifestyle was the main thing. And if I had to work another job to get by, then I would do that on the side. But Sovereign Lifestyle was always, always, always what I saw as the main thing. And I just kept building and kept adding pieces to it until I got to the point where I could quit my jobs. And the crazy part is like, when I would have a job in finance or whatever, like I'd have a good month in Sovereign Lifestyle or a good 2-3 months, and it just wasn't worth it to stay at my job anymore. Like once you're making 10, 15, 20K a month doing what you love to do, then there's no point in showing up to a 9 to 5 anymore to make 3, 4, 5 grand. Like it's just not worth your time. But anyways, my point being is like, how do you light that passion in other people? Like, how do you inspire them to take control and, play this game of like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be consistent regardless of the outcome, right? Because every single person always looks at what they get, and you can't look at it that way. Like when you look at what you get in return for the work you put in, which this is what every single person does. This is what 99.9% of people do, which is what separates the 1% in my mind at least, and I may be wrong, but my point being that like you have to just look at how much you can give, right? Whether that be your relationships, business, or whatever, right? Your clients, you have to continuously look at like how much you're able to give and then just continuously add to that, right? Like what are ways that you can add more and more and more value over time and then just give that to people with nothing in return. The crazy part is the more that you give and expect nothing in return, the more the universe just works in your favor and you end up getting more. And I know this is like that's kind of like a universal thing, right? Like it's just the more you only get what you give. So, um, with that being said, I think the biggest hurdle for people starting in this industry is they look at what they can get first and then they try to give as a secondary thing. And guys, it just doesn't work that way. Like you just have to take the time and just really develop different systems and ways of doing things and then be generous and just give that to people and ultimately just look at the impact you can make on people's lives. And then the crazy part about that is like as you impact lives, like it becomes easier and easier, and then you'll have clients come in faster and faster, and eventually you're making all this money as a byproduct of the impact that you've made in people's lives, which ultimately leads to ultimate freedom for you, because then you can work from wherever you want in the world. Um, but you just have to make sure that you're being disciplined enough to show up and make sure you're taking care of your people. Um, so, so it's interesting. It's interesting to try and share that passion because for me, like I've done everything. I've went through the mud. I started Sovereign Lifestyle while I was sleeping in on my aunt's couch in her basement. Like, you know what I mean? So with that being said, like this is me, Sovereign Lifestyle is everything that I could have ever wanted. It literally is Dylan Lowe. Like I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and I literally like it's my life, you know? And so it's hard to get like I don't want my people under me to go through that same amount of pain to get the same result, but like it's hard to make people appreciate things the same, So with that being said, like sharing your passion, right? And this is I want to go back to like how this can relate to you, right? On a day-to-day scale, um a good way that I like to think about it is you can only expect about 1/10 of the effort that you put into anything to kind of resonate with everybody else around you. So whether that be just as an example, as a brother or a husband or a spouse, or a leader in your company, the biggest thing that I can say is like only expect about 1/10 of the effort that you put in from your people. And that's not to be like cynical or be rude or whatever, but it seriously it really just is like you have to put in so much. Like you have to completely give yourself to the system or whatever the thing, like whatever it is, and you have to really just go all in with that and allow that to take place over a long period of time. And what's going to happen is people will start to see that, right? And the hard part is like you can't just give someone passion. You can't just be like, "Hey, here's what you do," and then they'll go do it. Like that's just not how it is. Like it's literally like rarely ever do people just look at how you do something and then execute it perfectly. So my point being that if you could simply just do more, right? Increase your inputs over and over and over and over. And if you're not getting the result, just remember that you can only expect back about 1/10 of the effort that you put in. So with that being said, if you're wanting 10 times more, you got to find a way to 10x your inputs, right? Whether that be, and this is where working smart comes into play, working smart versus working hard, right? You can't just continuously put in hours. You can't just, like, if I'm working 8 hours a day, I can't work 10 times that. It's just not possible. So, with that being said, it's like, what are the ways that you can put more in? right? And with Sovereign Lifestyle, we have a whole lot of different systems now that I've developed that give more and more resources to our trainers so that they have access to everything, right? Me being on this podcast is a way that I can give over and over and over and over without me having to be here, right? Like, for example, we've been on this for 15 minutes, right? And the interesting thing is, like, it takes me 15 minutes of my time, but on the flip side, if I get a million views and all million of those people watch the entire 15, 16 minutes of this, and I don't know how many minutes that is, 15 million minutes. And I didn't have to sit there and talk to people for 15 million minutes because I simply couldn't do that. Like, it's just not possible. But you know what I mean? So my point being, like, you have to continuously find ways that you can reach your people and help them grow without you being there all the time. Because once you're there, and this is a whole nother thing, but once you're there the entire time, it starts to become a crutch, right? So they depend on you a whole lot more than you need to be. Like, so you want to create people who are self-sufficient, but also driven, which, it just simply takes time, and you have to increase those inputs. So, if there's anything that I could say is, like, if you truly want to make an impact on the world, and whatever scale that is, right? Like, if you're just trying to make a difference in your family or with your spouse or your kids, right? Your business, your social media, whatever it is, it's simply just don't expect anything and increase your inputs. That's all it is, and do that over a long period of time. Eventually, what will happen, oh, excuse me, but eventually, what will happen as you're more and more consistent is that you will find systems, you will develop systems, and you'll develop ways that you can reach people in a better way. And the crazy part is then you're able to leave an impact on them without you even spending hours and hours and hours working with them. And that's ultimately what this podcast is. Like, in a nutshell, I just wanted to give you guys the tools required to get from where I was to where I am now. And if my journey inspires you, then great. Like, I hope that you take this and you're able to apply it in your daily life. But my point being, like, geez, I haven't taken a breath in a minute. But my point being that you just have to do more. Like, that's the reality, is do more, expect less, do more, expect less, do more, expect less, and do that over and over and over and over for years. And the crazy part is you'll pick up people along the way that, they'll watch every podcast or they'll listen to every podcast and they'll get it. But the interesting thing is, like, you just have to keep going to that point. Otherwise, even if you were to gain the fame or whatever, and if you don't have these systems in place, then nobody's going to, like, people may resonate with you, but you're not going to make an impact on them because you don't have the hours of podcasts recorded. You don't have, like, whatever the thing is, like, you don't have the work that was required, like, documented so that people can fully appreciate where you are now. And ultimately, that's the whole point of this podcast. But guys, my point being, if you are frustrated in life, and this is one thing that I deal with a lot, and this goes back to leadership, but if you're frustrated in life and you're having a hard time and you're wondering why you're not getting the results that you wanted, a lot of the time, you have to just look at the inputs, right? How much have you been giving? How long have you been giving it for? And just continue doing that. Put systems in place, work smarter, right, over a long period of time. And eventually, I promise, you will start to see things coming back to you. Everything always comes full circle. It's a law of the universe. So if you want more results, then just simply give more, whatever that looks like, whether that be posting on social media, giving gifts, or sending thank you cards, or whatever. Like, if you just sit down and think of, like, what would I like to receive, right? And then go give that, right? And if you can do that over and over and over without getting discouraged, and just continuously do that, this is a whole nother thing, without getting discouraged. And that's one thing that I get discouraged very easy when it comes to this, because I feel like I'm giving so much and I get very little in return, and that's fine. It's not a big deal, but my point being, like, there's a lot of times where I sit back and I'm like, well, should I be giving? Right? Like, should I be doing this? Should I be on the podcast? Um, and this is where I do my best to just reassure myself. Yes, that's who I am. I give. Like, that's who Dylan Lowe is. I give in every aspect of my life, and I genuinely try my best. And so at the end of the day, if I can look back and be like, I gave today and I tried my best, then that's a win for me. I don't care about the money or whatever. Like, whatever the result is, doesn't matter. As long as I can show up and say, I gave it my all today and I tried my best. And if I can continuously do that for long enough, the universe will respond and things will work out. And I know that. And that's kind of that leap of faith that you have to have. But anyways, we are way over today. But yeah, guys. So with that being said, give more, guys. Just continuously give and show up, and I promise, things will come full circle, and you just have to have faith in that. But okay, guys, we will catch you on the next one. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you in episode 11.